Brussels. Member nations of the Global Chemical Weapons Watchdog voted Wednesday to give the organization the authority to apportion blame for illegal attacks, expanding its powers following a bitter dispute pitting between Britain and its Western allies against Russia and Syria. The 82-24 vote provided the necessary two-thirds majority to enlarge the purview of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which so far lacked a mandate to name the parties it found responsible for chemical attacks. The headquarters of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in The Hague, Netherlands. The OPCW previously lacked a mandate to name the parties it found responsible for chemical attacks. Peter de Jong, The Associated Press. Many participating nations saw the inability to assign responsibility as a senseless hamstring, especially after fatal chemical attacks during the war in Syria. Russia opposed adding a new license to the agency's portfolio, saying that was a decision that belonged to the United Nations. Georgy Kalamanov, head of the Russian delegation to the OPCW conference, was quoted by Russia's TASS news agency saying that the situation in the OPCW can be compared to the Titanic, which got a hole and began to sink. The vote followed a proposal from Britain. Peter Wilson, the British representative to OPCW, said it had 30 co-sponsors, and that the support will allow the Nobel Prize-winning weapons watchdog not just to say when chemical weapons are used, but by whom. Article continued below. The office of British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, who travelled to OPCW headquarters in The Hague on Tuesday to push for the proposal, said the organization will immediately start work to help identify those responsible for chemical attacks in Syria. It fills a crucial gap left when the United Nations Security Council was prevented from renewing its own investigation in November, a statement from Johnson's office said, referring to objections Russia raised last fall to the OPCW work in Syria. The United Nations Security Council established a joint UN-OPCW investigative team to determine responsibility for chemical attacks in Syria. But Russia vetoed a Western-backed resolution in November that would have renewed the joint team's mandate. Russia argued that the change Britain proposed would undermine the Chemical Weapons Organization and threaten its future. Its representative said at the two-day meeting's opening that the Security Council was the only place to discuss such issues and that an adoption of the proposal would undermine the UN. Russia has veto power as a permanent member of the Security Council. Alexander Shulgin, Russia's ambassador to the Netherlands and the OPCW, said the vote to expand the organization's authority showed that Western nations want to bypass the Russian veto in New York. Norwegian ambassador Martin Sorby voted with the overwhelming majority and called the outcome a decisive and necessary decision to expose the perpetrators of chemical attacks. Britain made its proposal in the wake of the chemical attacks on an ex-spy and his daughter in the English city of Salisbury, as well as in Syria's civil war and as part of attacks by the Islamic State group in Iraq. Britain has accused Russia of using a nerve agent in March to try to assassinate former spy Sergei Skripal, which Moscow strongly denies.